processed about 5,000 of these SBA loans, but you must have other applications that are in progress, maybe in the thousands. What happens to those people?
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I'm glad to be on here today. So exactly to your point, we have about 4,000 applications that we were in the process of working through. Another 6,000 applications that were still in our queue that we were working to get towards. So for Valley alone, although we processed 5,000, there's 10,000 applications. In our mind, it's about $1 billion of potential loans that our small businesses need that we were unable to get to.
And you were unable to get to them either because their applications came in late or the processing just took longer than you thought. So those people are just basically in a state of suspended animation, awaiting potentially another supplement of capital into this program. Am I right?
That's exactly correct. I mean, we spent about 25% of our staff dedicated to this. Indirectly, our entire staff was focused on this. So we had people working till 2, 3, 4 in the morning. So it wasn't from a lack of resources that we allocated to this. It was largely a lack of funding that the government had provided. So in my expectation...
So let me understand one other thing, Ira, here, and forgive me for not knowing this, and that is, where does the actual loan money come from? In other words, once the loan has been approved by you and by the SBA, does the SBA front you the loan money, or does the money come out of your resources and then you go back to the SBA? And then finally, what happens if the loan goes bad? Who's stuck?
It's a good question. So the money's definitely funded by us at first. We have 10 days from the date of approval, from when the SBA gives us that approval, to fund the loan. Valley is responsible in our instance for funding that loan. Once a period of time comes, about 2 months, that a borrower can then, at his or her discretion, request forgiveness for that funding. A request would come to Valley, and then we would then go to the SBA to look to be reimbursed for the money that we put out. Some borrowers may decide that they want to keep the full 2 years, and Valley would then be responsible for funding that loan for a full 2 years. So not only have we been diligently working on how we're going to process all these loans, how we're going to put out documentation for all these loans, there's been significant efforts on how we're going to fund all these loans from a liquidity perspective as well.
If the loan ultimately goes bad in year 2, they can't pay, the business goes belly up, are you then stuck, or do you then go back to the SBA to get compensated?
So we spent a lot of diligence at first, making sure that what our responsibilities were here, making sure we did the correct diligence in assessing borrower eligibility and assessing the loan balance that the borrower took. If we did all of that correctly, it's our understanding that the government is then ultimately responsible for it. That said, though, it is in our case $1.5 billion that we have to put out for a period of time. But in my mind, it's the best thing we can do. You know, we did our smallest loan was for $425. And we spent over 6 hours of our people working on that $425 loan. We weren't doing it because there was a significant financial impact to us. We were doing it because it was the right thing for the community.
Yeah, well, that's what community banks excel at, among many other things. A couple of final, very quick questions and quick answers, if I might. Have you had to do, or do you anticipate having to add to loan loss reserves?
As a result of the PPP program, there's definitely no expectation for that. There's our quarter earnings are coming up, so I'd probably be a little bit remiss if I told you, sort of how we're thinking about it. But I think similar to what the other banks that have reported, the economy has gone definitely in a different direction than what the expectation was last year. So for all banks, there's definitely a significant expectation that provisions are going to be increased for the year. That said, part of the challenge is, in my mind, in understanding what the severity of the recession is this pure significant amount of deferrals that we put out there.
Right.
If you think about it, from a traditional perspective, delinquencies, TDRs, measures that typical analysts use to get an understanding of how bad credit is, none of that's going to come to fruition until after the deferral period. So we're not going to know really until the third quarter, late second quarter, how bad everything really was when some of these loans that have been on deferral are now unable to be paid.